a quick story is for people listening who don't know the story. My father is the jazz musician Roy Ayers. Um, my mother never really knew him, met him, and was just like, this guy is amazing. She was 21 when she met him, and she said, I
Right.
want you to be the father of my child. You don't have to be part of our lives. And he agreed.
Welcome to The Creative Asylum, a weekly podcast that digs deep into the minds of visionary creators of all stripes. Musicians, actors, filmmakers, writers, artists, cartoonists, and cultural disruptors. Here, we'll discuss perspectives of living life on your own terms. Life lessons that keep us grounded and sane, and sometimes pull us back from the edge. So, take a deep breath, loosen your grip on the bland and the boring. This is your weekly prescription for authentic living, creative clarity, and hopefully, a little bit of cultural rebellion.
Side effects may include spontaneous joy, existential epiphanies, and an uncontrollable urge to do weird and beautiful things.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. This is The Creative Asylum, and I'm your host, Daniel House. Today's episode is with a old friend, somebody I have not talked to in at least 20 years prior to this particular conversation, a man named Nabil Ayers. He has had an incredible career, both professionally and creatively as well. He is the president of Beggars Group, basically ran 4AD Records for ages, has been a drummer in a number of bands. But one of the things I was most interested in talking about was his recently published book called My Life in the Sunshine, which is basically an exploration of his non-relationship with a very famous father, the jazz musician Roy Ayers. The reasons for him not having a relationship is probably very much not what you think it might be. It's actually a very interesting arrangement, and we talk about that. But that book was a real epiphany for him. It opened up all sorts of doors, and it really opened up his exploration for the next step, which is a podcast called Identified, in which he interviews other people, also creative people, about what family means to them, what identity means to them, especially in sort of non-traditional kinds of environments, similar to what he grew up knowing. Anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really great to reconnect with Nabil after all this time. And let's just head on over to the conversation with Nabil Ayers. Nabil, hello. How are you?
Hello, Daniel. I'm great. How are you? It's been a
I'm
while.
doing okay. It's been a long time. Yeah, I think I was trying to think today when we first met, and I think it was right about the time you joined the Lemons.
That would make sense. Yeah. I remember, I don't know if it was the first time we met, but I have a funny early memory where
Let's hear it.
you put out, I of course, was a massive CZ fan, as you know. I went to college in Tacoma at the University of Puget Sound, and from 89 to 93. So for me, My Name was my favorite band, a little known Tacoma band who you put out 2 great records by.
Such a great band.
Actually became friends with some of them and thought that at the time was like, wow, this is crazy. I'm friends with these guys in this huge band. Little did I know they were just like some guys in a band, but
they should have been a huge band.
Yeah, I know. I still listen to those records. So I moved to Seattle after college in 1993 and started putting out records, as one does, like by my friends' bands and my bands, and got to know Don Robertson, who managed the Lemons, and he was managing the band Popsicle, and you put out Popsicle's first record, and I was starting a label.
First 2 records, actually.
Right, that's right.
Yes,
and Don suggested, he was like, oh, you should put out a 7-inch by Popsicle. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And it was the funniest thing, because his office was close to the CZ office. He was on Mercer under the East Lake Cafe. And I remember a box of Popsicle 7-inches. I was bringing them to Don's office, taking them out of the car, and you and some other people were walking up the hill, probably to the East Lake Cafe, and you saw it, and you stopped, and you're like, what's that? The timing of me having a 7-inch by the band whose records you put out as you were walking up the hill was, and I knew who you were, but you had no idea who I was, and so it was a really awkward, funny situation.
So that's probably when we met, right then and there.
Might have been, yeah.
Right, because I put out a Lemon single
before I was in the band, but
right before you joined, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think we really got to know each other more when you and Jason started Sonic Boom.
Yeah, of course. 97.
And you were what? You were young men.
We were both 25 when we opened the store, which was,
So
you could do that then. That was the cool thing.
okay.
We didn't have money, and we just figured it out. Seattle wasn't expensive yet.
I was okay. Maybe that's. I was going to say, how did you do that? But maybe that's
Yeah.
the answer is that it wasn't expensive because
Yep.
I guess people ask me how I started a record label. Well, I didn't. I took one over, but I
Right.
basically started a record.
Yeah.
label.
Yeah.
And at age 24.
Wow.
So yeah, I guess it's the same damn difference, really.
And that's the thing too. I think like when you're young, I don't know, you have less to lose in a way. I mean, when I was 25, when we opened Sonic Boom, Jason and I both lived in houses with roommates and paid like $300 a month rent, and
Right.
life was pretty simple. So it's like if it didn't work, oh well, it didn't work. It's not like we would have had to remortgage our houses or our kids couldn't go to school. Like none of that stuff existed. So it was.
But I was also thinking like I feel sometimes, and maybe not, but I feel sometimes like Seattle is kind of unique in that way. Like there was all these local scenes all over the country, but for some reason, bands in Seattle, like in the 80s, were recording. And I feel like that wasn't happening everywhere else, but maybe it was because, I mean, I guess there were small scenes.
Right. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, we used to get into that at Sonic Boom when bands would come through town. I think we learned pretty quickly. I think Seattle, in a way, people in Seattle were spoiled where everybody thought, well, every town has like a KCMU or KXP and a Stranger and a Rocket and the End and the Seattle Weekly and just lots of people who want to go support live music and 10 great record stores and all the things that we had. And that was not the case. Even in the sort of 90s heyday of whatever indie America, there were certainly cities that had scenes like that, but it wasn't. Seattle really had a lot going for it that made it all work for such a long time.
I mean, KCMU
Yeah.
was one of the most consequential radio stations of any city I've ever lived in, especially like in the 80s. I can remember getting excited because I was going to turn on the radio because I knew I was going to hear like probably 3 things that I would have to go out and buy the next day.
Right. That's as good and bad. Yeah.
It's good. It's good. Better to buy records than to buy drugs. That's what I
agreed.
Think. So you started, I mean, something about your whole life, and part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you is because you're one of those people that just A, has done all kinds of different things, and B, is always kind of moving forward onto whatever the current thing is or the next thing is. And that's something I very much admire. I mean, maybe it's because I see it a little bit in myself too. But I mean, you started a record store at 25. You were playing in a bunch of bands. I mean, I met you around the time you were playing Lemons or maybe before then. I'm not sure. You played in Alien Crime Syndicate. You played with one of my favorite bands from Seattle, the Long Winters.
Yeah.
And I know you've done a bunch of other stuff as well. You've published this book, which...
That was a crazy thing to do. Yeah.
I think it's an amazing thing. I'm still trying to finish my first book.
Oh, really? Wow. It's quite an undertaking. Yeah.
I'm finding it really difficult. I'm not sure how you did it. Maybe we can talk sometime and
we can. We could even talk now.
Yeah.
The funny thing is my book came out 3 years ago now.
Right.
And I'm still not sure how I did it. It really is one of those things that in a way, and I don't mean to belittle anything, it was a ton of work and for a long time, but still in a way feels like it just sort of propelled itself. I really felt like I wasn't trying to do it. I had to do it. And so I had to commit time to making it finish itself. It really felt more like that, if that makes any sense.
Did you experience like a lot of emotional blockage? Because I mean, your book is about a lot of very internal reflection and perspective on your own life and around a relationship that has its own complexities. And that's something I can relate to because my upbringing was just kind of nuts, like full blown nuts. And at one point I was going to write a different book about my first 15 years of life. And I was going to call it Song to My Father. And you kind of wrote a book that is kind of a song to your father.
Right. And it's, titled after a song that my father wrote.
Right. So, and a song that is, by the way, just I love that song so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I love his whole body of work so much.
So good. Yeah.
So what was going on in your own life sort of that planted the seed that kind of pushed you through that whole process? And, what was it exactly that you had to do it? Was that part of a process of, was it
It's
healing, or was it just sort of
It's hard to
understanding it?
pinpoint.
Yeah,
This is a funny one because I've answered this question lots of times, and I mean
sure.
that in the best way because it
Uh-huh.
evolves and it changes, and I still
Uh-huh.
keep learning. This is different than it would be 6 months ago. So I love talking about it because it actually makes me think, and I think differently about it every time. So if I really think about it, and some of this is weirdly in the book, but and the quick story is for people listening who don't know the story. My father is the jazz musician Roy Ayers. My mother never really knew him, met him, and was just like, this guy is amazing. She was 21 when she met him, and she said, I
Right.
want you to be the father of my child. You don't have to be part of our lives. And he agreed. So it's a longer story, but that's the really short version. They were never together. They never broke up. They never got divorced. He never left us. None of the stuff that people assume and think is my background actually happened.
But she literally approached him with that as like,
yes, it was
this
a
is what I
deliberate
want.
decision on both
Wow.
of their parts, an agreement, if you will. And I had an incredible childhood, wonderful mother who I'm still very close with, who's probably texting me right now on silent, and an incredible male role model, and my uncle who got me into music. And Roy, simply as planned, was not part of our lives. Um, and but he was always there, meaning I look like him. His records were in record stores. I got into music, and that wasn't as much of a thing until after college in Seattle. 90s hip hop, him having a huge resurgence and being sampled a lot, and then just being
Uh-huh.
in the music industry, and suddenly people being like, oh, any relation? And so it really became part of my life when I was an adult. It was totally inescapable, and I would hear his music all the time. So that's what I think started to sort of quietly feed it all these band touring years in the 90s and 2000s. And then, interestingly, I just started writing for fun at some point now, probably almost 10 years ago, but it really, I think, is linked to Jason and I selling Sonic Boom. We opened this record store in Seattle and we were both 25 in 1997. And that's for a long time, that is who I was and what I did. I also
Sure.
played in bands, and Jason DJ'd. We did other things, but that was our identity. And then I moved to New York and sort of stepped back, but I was still part of it and would be, make big decisions with Jason. And we sold the store in 2016, almost 10 years ago. I remember there's one specific thing in the agreement with the new owner, who was great and who we're friends with. It was that our email addresses expired, 30 days or 60 days or something like that. And Jason and I had this conversation. I remember it really well. He was like, that's like the only email address he'd had. And
Really?
we were talking, we're like, well, that's weird. That's who we are, is
Huh.
Jason at sonicboomrecords.com and Nabil at sonicboomrecords.com. And that's almost the weirdest part of selling the store, is it's changing our identity in this really weird way. And after that, I got kind of depressed, and it was weird because I had this wonderful job running 4AD in New York. Everything was going great. We were putting out successful records, so I had nothing to be depressed about, but it was that the store wasn't part of me anymore. And it's that all I did was have this job that someone paid me to do. And even though it was an incredible job and I loved it and I was lucky to be there running 4AD, one of the best labels in the world, it still felt
Yes.
like
One of
this
my
other
favorite
thing that
labels
was
of
like,
all time.
yeah, a lot of people's. And I can say
Yeah.
this because it's not like I started it. I was an employee, but I love it. So suddenly it really felt like, oh, weird. The identity, the thing that I started, that my friend and I built, that's gone. Now I'm just this guy that gets hired to do things, and I have that email address, and that's great, but something is missing. And I hadn't played in a band for a long time, which has also felt like that kind of thing. Like suddenly it just felt like in a weird way I was missing a creative outlet, even though owning a record store doesn't sound like that. It actually was for me, I think I realized.
Sure.
And that's when I started writing for no reason other than I just felt like I was in my 40s at the time, and I was like, I think I just have like lots of stories and things to talk about. And the first thing I wrote and published was this sort of short piece that The Stranger accepted, which was when Jason and I were deciding how we wanted to announce the sale of Sonic Boom. We wanted it to be, we were really happy with the new owner. The store is going to stay the same. It wasn't turning into a Subway, which it easily could have. So, we wanted, Seattle can be very picky and clicky and all those things. We really want to let people know that this is a good thing. We're happy about it.
Right.
Support the store. So I wrote this thing that was sort of just like some of my favorite memories of the store. And Sean Nelson was the music editor at The Stranger, and he agreed to run it. So that's how we announced it. The Stranger sort of ran this piece. And I remember thinking like everything flipped at that moment. I mean, some of it was like, oh wow, so many people emailed me or DM'd me or whatever saying like, oh, I met my wife at the store, or I remember this in store, but just like really hundreds of memories from people. This all came flooding in from every channel. And all at once I got this like, oh wow, this kind of feels like being in a band, if I'm being vain, like the attention thing. My name is on a thing and people are liking it. But it also just feels like I did something and it connected with people. And I'm not even saying like I wrote something so good. I'm just saying I reminded people of something that like triggered a story for them. And that felt sort of really cool and important. So there's something about that particular piece and publishing it that definitely just gave me the itch. And I was like, I just thought I should write more because I like doing it. There's more things like that in my head. So I just started writing a ton. And that's right about the time that I started dating my now wife, Allie Jane. And I was showing her stuff and I was like, here's some more record store stories. Here's some stories about bands. And she was like, yeah, these are all great and really fun. You need to write about your father and your race. And I was like, oh. And so that's what actually led to the book. But I wasn't trying to write a book, but I started writing and it became one.
In that moment when she said that, like how did you feel?
Terrified.
Okay.
Which is good.
That I can relate to because I think that's at the core of my own experience and my own roadblock that I'm constantly throwing in front of myself.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, talk about, and I'm somebody who's not very, I mean, I spent 40 something years, I was 50 when the book came out. I spent 48 years really not talking about my father and that relationship, being super guarded about it, changing the subject when someone asked about it, really just like cutting it off. I just didn't want to. And I'm still not sure why, but weirdly writing about it turned into this like, oh, now this is my way of talking about it. And so it was really cathartic. I learned a lot just about how I thought, because what I was doing before that was trying to cut it off as soon as possible. So I just wrote so much and I was like, how do I do this? I guess I write about each time I remember meeting him, because I did meet him a few times as a kid. I mean, the crazy thing was we would run into him on the street in New York. That I remember that happening a few times. And I remember it. So I was writing about that. I remember seeing him live when I was a kid. There's all these moments to write about. And then I thought, okay, well, I'm done with those. Maybe I'll write about all the times I can remember walking into a club and hearing his music, because that triggered something else in me. And so I just kind of wrote about every way I could think about writing about a non-relationship with my father, and ended up with suddenly, like, I still see it. It's very visual. It's this long table and these little stacks of stories, and it's 2 years old, 7 years old, 22 years old, blah, blah, blah. And there was this point where I was like, wow, I wonder if I'm writing a book. Like, there was an actual moment when I realized how long it was, how much time it covered, and how much stuff it was, and that there was actually sort of a story to it and an arc. And so, and then that made me even more terrified, because I was like, I don't know how to write a book. I don't even read books. I've never been a good reader.
That's all right. You didn't know how to run a record store either.
Right, exactly. Right? Seattle, you just do it.
And you know, you didn't know how to run a label until you until you did it.
True. Right.
But I think that's so much at the core of like people I want to have these conversations with is I think so many people that I'm going to talk to, I think there's going to be this common thread of like, I didn't do this until I did this thing. Right. And now this, and then I did it. And I've done it. And
the fear thing is interesting that you mentioned, because you feel it too. And I think part of it too is like, sound like a motivational speaker or something, but like not letting that fear, really realizing that the fear is the positive thing. Like when I was writing stories about my bands in my record store, I was laughing and I was having fun. I was like, I can't wait for people to see this. And when my wife mentioned writing about my father and my race, I got this dark pit and this really like, almost like, God, are people going to look at me? Or I have to tell all these stories I've been hiding? And that was the most powerful thing. Even though it was the most terrifying, it was the idea that like feeling like that is the thing to lean into, not to get away from. And that, it took me till I was 47 to realize that.
And but that feeling of feeling terrified is probably because what you're doing is you're getting like deep into your own psyche. Like this is the personal stuff. Like I feel like, why is my first book that? Like in my case, I'm writing an oral history book, and it consists mostly of interviews with other people.
Oh, great.
So in a way that should be easier because it's just a process of assembly, but I'm still plumbing this whole place that kind of like your book and the name of your podcast, for me, is very much about identity.
Right.
Because when I left Skinyard, that kind of was my entire identity.
Right. Totally. Right.
And
It might
it's
not have been about an
weird.
email address, but the same concept. Like, who are
Same
you
idea.
now? Who am I now?
It's the same feeling.
Mhm.
So when you wrote this book, did you reach out to your father at all and talk to him about any of this stuff, or you did not?
I didn't. A lot of people asked me that, and I thought about it. It's funny. I don't want to say a lot of people asked me that because I was really doing it in secret until it became a real thing. I wasn't telling any. I'm not the person that's like, hey, I'm working on a book, and then it doesn't happen. And I'm the guy that said that. I like to be the opposite and quietly work on a book and then tell everyone it's coming out in 6 months. So I thought about it, but it didn't. I don't think it needed it, and I don't think it could have benefited from it. I think, to me, the book is really about my view of what it is. And in a way, I think finding out, not that I even could have, I don't think I could have, but finding my father's view on some things would have, I didn't want it to be solved, if that makes any sense. There's so many open questions, and that's fine. That's for me to deal with. That's not for him to answer. In a way, it would be giving him too much power to do that.
I think one of the great things about, your particular process is you wrote this book about this, I don't know, should I call it a non-relationship? But I don't get the sense that you were saddled with any kind of pain or emotional trauma around that due to the whole way that your mom and your father, made that arrangement.
Right. That was always my sort of, when I would say like, oh, I never knew my father, but and people say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, well, don't be sorry. There's this, like there's that whole thing. Right. But, and this is all in the book, but what did happen when I was 36, 37, living in Seattle, he was still touring. He passed away earlier this year, but he was still touring until last year, 84 or something like that. Constant, just like that's who he was and what he did. So he would come to Seattle every year, and I would always notice and just think like, whatever, no big deal. And one year, right, it might have been around when he turned 70, there's something in me, I saw it, and I was like, if I ever want to learn anything, medical history, family stuff, like I tried to almost, I think in my brain, I made it very technical and pragmatic and unemotional, which is what allowed me to try to do this. I was like, it's time to reach out if I ever want to. He might never be here again. He might die tomorrow. I have no idea. So it's a long story, but I got in touch with my mom didn't know how to get a hold of him. I got in touch with his booking agent. And anyway, he ended up calling me and saying like, yeah, I'll be in Seattle soon. Let's go to lunch. And we had this really great lunch. And this is kind of the big turning point where I was like, wow, this is amazing. Really like sitting across from somebody that I'd never actually talked to. I'd met for like, not exaggerating, 30 seconds as a kid, but never talked to as an adult. Sat across from him for 2 hours. He didn't apologize for anything because there was nothing to apologize for. I wasn't angry because there was nothing to be angry for. So it was the weirdest, like, clean, fresh start where everyone was great. And we just like, it was so wild to how he laughed and how he moved and these things, just to stare at somebody and see that and be like, how is it possible that we've never really met, but we are the same?
Did you recognize yourself in some of those gestures?
Oh, yeah.
And some of those
it was crazy. And he did the same. We were pointing at things and the cheekbones and the hairline, all these things. It was really just like, it was too much and it was great. And, I didn't, and then I kind of interviewed him. I still have the notes, everything about, he could tell me about his family and other kids and all this stuff. And it kind of turned into like, we didn't say this, but to me, it was like, I'm 36. I own a record store. Everything's great. I'm not looking for anything except to maybe do this again every 6 months or every year when you're in Seattle and I'm in New York. I want to learn more. That's kind of it. And so we left it at that. But then I went to New York a lot. The Long Winters were touring a lot. So I was in New York, maybe 5 times the next year. Always called him. And it got to this like, who's this? Oh yeah, I'm really busy, or not answering. And it got to the point where then I would call and it would really be like a physical fear of calling, this rejection thing, which of course I'm sure goes back to the 35 years leading up to that, where I always said everything was fine, but surely it wasn't totally fine. So it really turned into this thing where in my head, I was like, man, this guy got off so easy. I could be more mad. I could be asking for things. I could be a total asshole. All I'm asking is to get coffee again once or twice a year and just like learn a little bit more. And he can't even do that. Fuck him. That's really where that was the first time at like 36 where I was like, now I feel how I think people expected me to feel for 36 years, but I never felt. Now I feel it. And that's when it actually started, the anger with him. And so that's
I'm
really
totally fascinated
the
by
book
that.
isn't about that, but that's the point where things shift and where things shifted in my life and where I kind of got into it more.
Wow. That's so wild.
Yeah, it was nuts.
I think by the time I was that age was the time I finally got rid of all my anger.
Right. It's a very weird thing to have start at 36.
Wow. If you're enjoying this conversation, please make sure you hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. It's the quickest way to grow our channel, and it's absolutely free. You can also subscribe to our other channels on social media. Check out our Instagram at Creative Asylum CA, that's the letter CA, or on TikTok at The Creative Asylum, that's all one word. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook profile is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. All right, back to the episode. Let's talk about the book and the podcast. I'm assuming that the two are intimately related to each other. I'm assuming that the book is what basically was the seed for the idea of the podcast.
Yeah, it's funny. So the book came out, and I mean, I treated it like I played in bands, and my thing was like, I'm not gonna, my publisher is like, yeah, we'll support, if you want to do a book release event in New York, and if you happen to be in LA, and I was like, oh, okay, it's like I'm gonna go on a book tour, whether you're interested or not. And of course, once I started booking stuff, they were great and got on board. But in the end, over a year and a half, I think I did 70 book events, which is a lot. People don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And really, like, anywhere I started doing stuff at universities, do things at record stores. And I mean, really, like, I did a thing in Tokyo. I did 2 things in Idaho, like anywhere and everywhere. I loved it. And some of these things were packed. Some had 10 people. It didn't really matter. It was always fun.
Just like being in a band.
Right. Always a different conversation. Always meet some interesting people.
Yes.
And a lot of it was about, the book opened up a lot of doors because I still never really connected with my father. But the book, I knew it would do that. And it did really quickly. So now people are starting to come out. Sometimes people are like, we're distant cousins, or I was in your father's band, or I saw him in the 70s and I have a really good story. Every one of those things to me was like, that's why I'm going to Cleveland. I knew that would happen if I went there, and it did, that kind of thing. So it was, of course, promo, but it was also like this self-discovery thing. But what started to happen was, once it was long enough that a lot of people had read the book when they came to book events and kind of already knew things, they would start sharing their story with me. And I got a lot of like, my father was...
Their personal stories.
Yeah, like either in the Q&A or even afterwards sometimes, like, my father was also a jazz musician, here's my story, or I'm biracial and struggled a lot with this, like, would find some way in and would tell. And sometimes these stories were so fascinating that I was like, oh, wow, this is like more than just promo or more family. It's actually a really interesting way to connect with people. And when you sit there and tell your story, people were really open with you because they feel like they know you, even though you haven't talked to them yet. So this really, and I liked that. A lot of people don't like that. I loved it. So this cool exchange started to happen. The book stuff was definitely winding down. It'd been a year and a half, and I didn't feel like traveling. It also just started to feel like, it's not new anymore. And there was like a big podcast producer company that got in touch, but we just had some kind of Zooms that went nowhere. But then I had it in my head. I was like, but a podcast does sound kind of fun. So through a friend of a friend who's a podcast producer in London, he's just like, look, he told me what I would tell a band. He's like, just do what you want to do. What are you interested in? What excites you? What do you think would be cool? And so we ended up with, like, I kind of told him what I just told you. It was like, I'm sort of sick of talking about myself, but I'm invested in these conversations about identity and about who people are and why they're that way. And it's not specifically about race. It's not specifically about music. It's about whatever gets people to that point. And so we came up with the name Identified, and I've just been interviewing people, mostly musicians, really, just because that's who I know, but it's not very musical. But what's fun is, like, and you'll be able to relate to this. Like,
well, I've watched a bunch of episodes.
Oh, thanks. The first few I did, I was like super like, okay, I need to ask 20 questions. I need to be ready and all this stuff. And I realized really quickly it went so much better when I didn't have that.
Yep.
And when I didn't prepare, because the question is not, tell me about your new album. I know you wrote I'm not asking things that are, that I'm expected to know. I'm asking things that you don't know. And if someone knows enough about the podcast to come on it, they have a story. And so I've never gotten a situation where someone's like, don't you have any more questions? Like usually it's like people just talking
It's like,
and talking and talking.
we're almost out of time. Let's wrap this up, right?
So it's been really fascinating. And it's still crazy because I think we've taped 44.
Wow, really?
Which means there's still like another 15 or something in the can coming out now in season 2. But none of them have felt the same. There's always a joke when the guest leaves. My producer and I are like, well, never heard that story before, because really they're all like, it keeps being goes down a totally different angle, and that's what's really fun about it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Deco Case episode.
Wow, she was great.
I mean, I've enjoyed them all. I think that one connected to some of my own history in ways that I was like, because she was talking about having family that came from Ukraine,
right?
Which on my mother's side was kind of the same story. Like,
interesting.
My grandfather escaped Russia when he was 5 with his parents on the underside of a train to escape the pogroms.
You know, I don't know if you've heard this one. You should listen to the Olia Hercules episode.
Okay.
She is a Ukrainian chef who lives in London, and it's really good about her Ukrainian lineage. It's really fascinating stuff. But that's a wild story. Wow.
And it's also so relevant to like all the shit that's going on right now.
Of course.
Which just, I'm kind of fixated on all of that. And it's kind of funny because I'm connecting with that part of my history in a way that I never have before, just because of this war. Like I'm really pissed off, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I'm literally thinking of getting a tattoo of that Ukrainian shield. Wow. Just kind of
and you were never thinking that before, but now that it's
ever. And you know, like, it's weird. Like, I've never been to Russia. I've never been to Ukraine. I can't speak a word of it. No,
but you feel it.
But I'm starting to think about it. I'm starting to think about it, you know?
Yeah. But there's that. I think people have that connection. You know, you have it. You know, you have stories about it. So you feel connected to it.
Well, it's fascinating all the different ways that we do have identity, you know? And I think for so many people, I think it's actually very interesting. I know you're not exclusively having conversations with musicians, but you are, because it's the low-hanging fruit. And that's exactly how this is starting. Like, in my mind, I'm like, I don't want this to be a specific podcast about just musicians.
Right.
So, you know, I want to get actors. I want to get writers.
Sure.
I love people that do a whole bunch of different stuff. Like in your case, you have a podcast, you're an author, you know, you're in the music business, you're a musician. But, you know, I'm more interested in the broader process of people's creativity, how they live a truly creative life in their most authentic way, you know?
Yeah. And musicians are, I mean, we're both lucky because we know a lot of musicians, and, you know, like it or not, very good example of that. Like that, lots of great stories, lots of interesting backgrounds. And I think maybe that's part of why people are drawn to music.
And I think also with musicians, very often, if you're talking about family, that musical family becomes a very big part of who they think of as family.
Yep.
Like I very much think of like my family as the people I choose.
Yeah.
Much more than the people I was born to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, think about people who've been in, you know, Nate from Foo Fighters was on. He's been in the band for 30 years. That's a long time.
Wow, really? That long? That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So what's the longest you've been in a band?
It's funny, not that long. 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Maybe ACS was a little longer. Maybe it was 4 or 5, but never like 10 years.
Yeah.
I think, is it a drummer thing where like, I wasn't the first drummer. I was in 4 real bands. The first one was the Lemons, which I joined because the story's so funny. I don't know if you know this story. So Art was the first drummer who plays on that Lemon 7-inch. And there was a guy named Rob who's in the band for not that long before me. And Rob, we later learned, I happened to walk into Don, our manager's office, because I was friends with him, and he hung up the phone. He was like, "Oh, fuck." He was all pissed. I was like, "What's going on?" And he said, Lemons are opening for Mudhoney at Pain in the Grass, which is like the biggest at the time, like outdoor free show in Seattle. It's a huge deal. And Mudhoney was huge. He's like, and the show was in a week, and Rob, the drummer, just broke his arm. And at the time, I played guitar in a band, and people didn't know I played drums, which is my longer real instrument. And so I said to Don, I was like, "Oh, let me do it. I met those guys a bunch. I've seen them. Like, that'd be really fun." And so that's seriously why it happened, because I walked into the room. I would not have been thought of, even though I know Don, because I wasn't a drummer. So practiced with them a few times, played that show. There were 7,000 people at the first Lemons show I played. It was really fun. And then stayed in the band for a few years after. The next band was a band that I started with my friend Lance. Lance started it. He's a songwriter. That was actually the only band that I started, and that band broke up 3 years later. But then Alien Crime Syndicate, I joined. And then the Long Winters, I was like the 7th drummer.
Right.
So it's the Spinal Tap thing, right? You can always find something.
How many total members have been in Long Winters?
That's a good question. That might be its own podcast.
50 or 60?
We did. I flew to Seattle. This is, I don't know, God, before the pandemic. It feels recent, but it's probably 7 years ago, to do sort of a reunion show. And we did a KXP session that was in some public place, like in Pioneer Square. And I remember Kevin Cole introduced us, and it was John Roderick, who was the Long Winters. It was Eric Corson, who's a longtime bass player. And it was me on drums, and it was Sean Nelson, who I've known forever, but we were never in the same version. We were never in the band at the same time.
Okay.
So the funny thing about this, and it was in Kevin Cole's intro, was that this version of the Long Winters had never played together before until that day, even though it was all people who'd been in the band for a long time.
So you didn't get to rehearse together?
I think we rehearsed the day before.
You did? Okay. But just one rehearsal?
Never performed together. I think we just did one. Yeah.
That's still a little scary.
Yeah.
Like you don't have the time to sort of, build that
right
chemistry or that telepathy or just
exactly. Do you still play music?
Not really. That was going to be my question for you. But,
I'm looking at an electronic drum set sitting over here.
I think about playing music a lot.
Mm-hmm. Same.
If anything, I'm going to probably end up doing like a multi-track studio and collaborate over the World Wide Web.
Yeah.
Because my whole pattern, if I'm in a band, I'm going to get serious about the band.
Right.
Which means I'm rehearsing 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I have the time, the bandwidth, or the energy to do that. Also, I realize it would be the perfect excuse to create a distraction from finishing my book.
Or maybe it's the perfect ending to your book.
It could be, but then I'm also afraid that this podcast, that I've created this as a way to not finish my book.
That's an interesting thing, right? Things that take time and that are legitimate and that you're into take away from other things. Yeah.
So I actually have a very close cousin that I've only known for a very short window of time. This is one of those 23andMe stories.
Oh, great.
The closest match we ever got on my Jewish side, and my great-grandfather and her great-grandmother were brother and sister.
Wow, that's
so
where?
In New York.
Interesting. Okay.
Our great-great-grandmother.
Not in Russia or the Ukraine. This is more recent.
I've got Ukraine, and then from that same side of the family, I have Austria and Hungary. So Eastern European Jew, basically, right? Mm-hmm. So this is Joe and Sadie Abramowitz.
Wow.
Joe's sister was her great-grandfather or great-grandmother.
Oh, I love it. I mean, I love this stuff. Yeah.
So we emailed and we connected like we have been best friends for decades.
Wild.
And about 3-4 months ago, I was in New York. I went out for the Alice Donut first time ever in 9 years reunion show. And we finally we got to meet. So we met, we spent, I don't know, 6-7 hours together. And it was just oh my God, I've missed you so much.
Isn't that crazy?
And so we start talking and we keep finding these weird parallels, just simple parallels like, well, I like pie more than cake. Well, of course. Oh, well, what's your favorite flavor of pie? And I'm like, you're not going to say it. And it's like strawberry rhubarb. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like
that's
just
so
all
funny,
these, all these
I've
really...
had the same thing, but I also get into these patterns where it's like, you want that to work so bad that you can even just take the most simple thing and be like, whoa, I like pizza too. We must be cousins.
but down to their same flavor. And anyway, we keep finding these parallels. And then I'm talking about my writing project and my own getting in my way. She goes, oh my God, I have the same problem. I've been working on this book. And so about a month and a half, 2 months ago, we now have weekly calls every Sunday as each other's accountability partners.
Perfect. Yep.
And at the end of every conversation, we talk about what our goals are for the next week.
That's incredible.
So, and it's working.
So great.
I'm now working on my book every week.
Wow.
Before I would go months just not
Right.
touching it.
Now you're going to have to talk to somebody about it, so you need to do something.
And sometimes I'm like, I didn't get it done, or I only got 2 hours, but it's something. I love her so dearly.
That's amazing.
And I'm like, oh my God, all these decades that I haven't known you, I feel gypped. Right?
Yeah, totally.
But
lost time. You have to make up for lost time.
But it's not a gyp. It's a gift. It's a total, absolute gift,
I've connected with so many people, and it's interesting because it's across the board. So, I mean, my father had 2 kids after me who are 2 and 4 years younger. And I met the son, my half brother, who I think he's 4 years younger than me. And it was no big deal. Nice guy, didn't look alike, didn't feel similar, not into music, into sports, which I'm not. Like, really, it was just like, I'm just meeting a person. This is weird that we're related. And it got along totally fine. He gave me lots of info. It was really nice, but that was that. But then I've met, a lot of other people, but my father's sister, which was by far the most intense and great meeting. And she passed away a couple of years ago, but I got to spend a fair amount of time with her. She looks like she could be my mother. We got along so well. Same thing where it would almost, which is interesting because she was, 20-something years older than me. But I think just because she's an old woman and because I felt like a kid when I was with her, it felt like a grandmother I never had. But just an incredibly special relationship that instantly felt like that. Like the second we spoke and the second we saw each other in person, it was just like, oh my God, how did this not exist yet?
Right.
We both were robbed from this.
So what is that? How would you describe that? I don't know that I have a description.
Right, but it's common, and but what's interesting is it's not every time because I've met people closer than her. But when it does, it's
it's really real.
Right. So like the genetics are a real thing. I think that's sort of inarguable, right? People, siblings meet later in life and realize how close they are. And that's what it was actually like with my father too, I would say. But she was more excited than he was, and that's probably part of why I liked it so much.
Yeah. Well, there's no threat of expectation, I suppose, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking about something you said kind of at the beginning, and that was that who was your main father figure?
My uncle, my mother's
your
brother.
Uncle. Yeah. Okay. So you said your uncle was the one who really kind of got you into music.
Yeah.
At what point in your musical consciousness did your father's music kind of enter in as like, wow, I have a connection to that, even though it's indirect still, his music is beautiful.
Yeah, that's all good questions. So Alan was my mother is young. She had me when she was 22, and Alan's her younger brother, so he was 20. And he's an incredible jazz saxophone player who went to Berkeley and lived in New York when I was a kid. So we lived in New York for part of my childhood. When we didn't, I still always spent tons of time there, and I would stay with Alan. So he's the one. I was apparently, there's lots of pictures playing on pots and pans, that thing that kids do. And Alan saw that and was like, oh, well, we need to get him a drum set. And so when I was 2.5 years old, he bought me a drum set.
That's cool.
And I just started playing it and playing by ear and playing along to records. But I have tons of memories, and we have photos, and incredibly have audio on cassette that I've digitized of me and Alan playing together, him on saxophone, me on drums, playing the Sesame Street theme, the Rocky theme, like all the songs that I wanted to play, and me talking and being really bossy and telling him he's playing songs wrong. When I'm 3 or 4 years old and like listening to it, it's like, I wasn't a good drummer, but definitely knew the songs and had like a sense of rhythm. It's pretty wild to listen to.
And you had a definite point of view as well.
Yeah, exactly. So he was, could not have been more supportive from literally my earliest days. And that just turned into me kind of getting into music on my own, buying a Kiss record when I was 5. Always music. My mother's a dancer, huge music fan. She would always buy records. It wasn't like she was very pro. As soon as I started going to shows, she would always take me to shows. We went to so many things together. And then when I became an old enough teenager to start going with my friends, I remember her being really sad and like realizing she couldn't go to shows anymore. Yeah, because she would have been 35, late 30s, like definitely wanted to go to Jane's Addiction when I was in high school, but that kind of stuff. So.
And she was finally at an age where she's like, I'm getting my independence in my life.
Right, that's true too.
And now I can't go.
But there are some incredible moments with Alan where he was, he's a jazz saxophone player, but in the 80s in New York, the saxophone became a rock instrument for a while, where like tons of bands wanted a sax player, and he was like this in-demand guy. So he's not on the record, but he's in the Randy Newman "I Love LA" video, huge MTV song. He's the saxophone player because they needed there's lots of that kind of stuff. And when I was in 6th grade, my mother and I moved to Salt Lake City for her job. So nowhere near New York, but actually it was great, but that's a whole nother story. So I would visit New York a lot. And I remember Alan called me one day and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to go tour with this band. My friend's a saxophone player, but he's British and his visa's not working out. So I got the call last minute. Have you heard of them? They're called the Psychedelic Furs." And I was a 10-year-old kid who had MTV, and Love My Way was on MTV all the time. So I was like, "Oh my God, what?" And he's like, "Yeah, the first show's tomorrow in upstate New York," or whatever. So
I remember that tour.
So he did most of the Forever Now tour with the Furs.
Really?
And then the funny thing was, the horn player came back, but the Furs opening band, a band called Our Daughter's Wedding, who were signed to EMI at the time and who were a great like kind of synth band, they then hired my uncle. So now he's in another band opening for the Furs on the Forever Now tour, and I flew to meet him in San Diego, this place Perkins Palace, this kind of legendary venue where lots of bands played. And the Furs did 2 shows that night. They were both being filmed for like an ABC concert, so it's on YouTube. Went to both of those shows. I'm 10 years old, hanging out backstage. John Ashton, the Furs guitar player, is like, while he's sound checking, saying like, "Go get me a beer," and I'm running downstairs and getting a beer. Like all like really just like wasn't just like seeing stuff on MTV or on records. Like I got to be there and really learn what it was actually like at an incredibly young age. And that, I think that more than anything was the exposure, more than playing or listening, was just like, this is what it is all day. This is what these people do.
This is the world.
Yeah. And that was pretty fun. And so, also my mother was great about, when we lived in Salt Lake City, it was just so easy to meet bands because the Salt Palace was the big arena. The Marriott Hotel was across the street. Everyone knew bands were staying there. The security guards were really good about keeping everyone out. But when me and my mother walked in and I was 11 and she was my mother, they just assumed we were guests. And so we would just sit there and wait. And the band would come in and my mother would go talk to them and say, "Come meet my son. He's a drummer." And that's how I got to talk to Rick Allen from Def Leppard when he was 19 and had 2 arms and was like the nicest guy in the world. Like lots of that stuff was pretty fun.
Sorry for the interruption, but we need to take a quick break for the sponsor of this episode.
This episode is brought to you by Bunny Smut. Are you sick of the Trump administration trying to gut our democracy and turn our country into a dictatorship? Are you disgusted with all the corruption, with the ICE raids against our citizens? Do you agree with the idea of no kings? If so, then Bunny Smut is what you're looking for. T-shirts that scream loudly "No to MAGA" and "No to Trump." We're fighting against Trumpism and autocracy one t-shirt at a time. BunnySmut.com.
It's the question that gets asked a lot is the sort of nature versus nurture. Did I get so into music because it's in my blood from my father? Or was it because my mother and my uncle, like every second of the day, that's what it was. Whatever I wanted, they were always into it, would always support it. And so combination?
I don't know. Yeah. Well, the answer is yes.
Right. And then I do remember, I mean, understanding my father's music, we always owned a few records. I knew it was my father. I knew I liked the music. I would see it. I would see his records in record stores in the 70s. You know, people put out 2 records a year. So there's always a new record. So I connected myself with him. I knew I looked like him. And I think in the back of my head, there was always a thing that was like, well, he's doing that, so I could probably do that. Something like that. But at the same time, musically, that I feel like that's something I missed out on. I mean, he is an incredibly well-trained, disciplined musician, as is my uncle. I am a kid who played along to Kiss records and got good enough to be in rock bands. And I'm not dissing myself. I think I was a really good drummer, but those guys are both really fucking good, like next level good. And that's, I never tried to do that. I was never pushed to do that.
Well, there's a whole different kind of aesthetic about being trained versus organically learning, you know? I mean, there's that whole thing about like, we have to learn the rules before you break them. But then there's the other way of thinking that if you're schooled, that whole idea of how you approach things from a punk rock perspective.
Totally. Right.
Yeah, maybe not. So you spent how many years like doing 4AD as a label manager? I know you're now...
13 years.
Okay. So
and then just moved into a role at Beggars, which is the same company effectively, but a different role. Yeah.
Yeah. Your musical career is astounding to me. I'm a little envious, but but really, I'm just like, wow, I think it's amazing.
It's wild. It's wild for me too.
But what I was going to say is that let's just take 4AD. I would venture a guess that the majority of musicians in most of those bands are probably self-taught.
Probably, right? I mean, the guys in the National, Bryce and Aaron, are incredible, like trained musicians.
Yeah.
Big Thief, Adrienne, who's one of the best guitar players in the world, I would argue, went to Berkeley, which surprised me because to me she plays in a way that I wouldn't guess is that well trained. Meaning,
and I guess in my mind, when I think of 4AD, I'm probably going back 15 years earlier.
Pixies, Cocteau Twins.
Pixies, Cocteau Twins, Bauhaus, like there is an independence and just all of these bands had such unique distinction. Just from
but I think you're right. Yeah, a lot of the way you get those interesting sounds is from people just doing what they do, especially when they do that in community with others, and it's a group of people figuring it out together. That's when it gets really interesting, right?
I think probably more of them went to art school than music school.
Yeah, totally.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, that's always a good place to meet people.
Yeah, for sure. So where are you going now? Like with Identified, you said you've done how many episodes so far?
Identified, we're in season 2. The first season was 20. The second season, I think we have 24, and we're only like 7 or 8 in. It's interesting because Kieran, my producer, is in London, and at his insistence, and he was really right, he's like, because of what we're doing, we need to do them in person. It's me and the guest on a couch,
right?
And it's him in the room with the cameras. So they all are very intimate in that way. So it's hard because we're not spending money. There's no one backing it. We don't live in the same city, but he's a podcast producer, so he's here often. I'm in London often for work. And strangely, we've had our best times in LA when lots of people are there. So we'll do like 3 or 4 days or just a weekend and do like 3 a day, which is kind of exhausting.
Yeah.
But it's a great way to be like, wow, we just got 7 episodes this weekend. And so we haven't recorded in a while. We will again soon. But it's interesting because once they start rolling out, of course, my friends are like, wow, you must be so busy, or how are you doing this? I'm like, I'm not doing anything. They're just coming out now.
And your work is when you're actually doing the interviews.
Yeah. Which is,
and your producer's putting them together.
Yeah. So I'm not editing. I don't know how to do that stuff. It's the conversation. And my trick has been, as I mentioned, to not do research, which sounds lazy, but it really just I think the conversations are so much more interesting when I'm actually learning and it's a real conversation. But also, and this goes back to sort of how the book tour led to this, is if I don't know the guest or don't know them very well, I spend 10 or 15 minutes kind of telling a version of my story and why I'm doing this and the book and the father stuff and all that, which, like at those book events, kind of opens the door and I think allows people to feel comfortable and like it's their turn to share. And then we just edit my part out because we don't need that every single week.
You plant that seed for them.
Yeah.
And then you just watch the tree grow.
Yeah.
So do you see any end to this, or it sounds like it's an amazing experience.
It's not going to turn into like my full-time thing, but I don't think I see an end. What we want to do, I know we'll do another season because we're making plans to be in LA in January. And I think we can get a lot in a week in LA in January, but what we want to do is some live events because I just think that sounds fun. And because all of this, of course, as you know, Daniel, goes back to being in a band. Everything relates to being in a band. For me, publishing a book, all of it. Publishing an article, I realized after I published a few articles, I was like, oh, I'm releasing singles. And now I need to work on my album, which is this book. Like it's all so band related. So I want to do live events, but like, in small spaces, something in Seattle, something in New York. Would you do
live events just one-on-one, or would you bring other people on the stage?
I think one-on-one, and maybe it's like, a small, like a 30 or 40 person cool space. And it's like one conversation, then maybe someone plays a couple songs and then it's another conversation. It's like a 2-hour event just to see what it feels like live with an audience. I think it would be fun.
I think it'd be amazing.
So that's the thinking. So that could happen next year. I would like that.
That'd be great.
I mean, it would be fun to like actually, it's not big enough, but to be big enough to like do a tour. That would be really fun.
I think you could. The question is, would you do the same person or would you do different?
No,
people?
I think you have different
people in every
right?
location. Yeah,
which would be hard to book, but yeah.
But you know what's going to happen then? You're going to get this small handful of people that are going to like follow you around like the dead. Because everyone will be different.
Right. That'd be a great problem. And then we can make merch and then,
But as long as you do it, you have to record them.
Right. I think we'd be recording episodes and doing them live. Yeah, that's the idea.
I love the
It'd be
idea. I
fun.
think it's great.
You can do it too. We can go on tour together.
That sounds fun.
There are a
Well,
lot of podcast tours. That's a thing. That's like a model.
one thing at a time.
Right.
I'm just trying to, I'm finally getting to a point where I'm doing these things. My first 7 episodes, I was out of focus the whole time. And unfortunately, I can't redo them. So on YouTube, they're just going to be out of focus. And
there must be an AI bot that can make you focus or something.
I think it has to do with this one piece of software and how it's interacting with my iPhone. And I think I figured out the setting literally yesterday.
Well, this will be the first in focus episode. I'm so proud.
This actually be the second, because I did one yesterday. One last question.
Sure.
Or not. Maybe it's not. I don't know. So you've written a book. Are you thinking that you might have another book in you?
I am. I'm in an interesting place where I didn't want to write a sequel.
Sure.
And then, and I don't want to be the like, oh yeah, my father, still my father. And then he passed away in March this year, and so much interesting stuff happened. And all this stuff came flooding out, and I've written so much. But I don't know. I mean, I've shared it with my agent. She shared it with, my whatever. It was a 1-record deal, 1-book deal.
Right.
Viking, that publisher, said, this is great. Kind of feels very close to the first book. And a couple other people said that too. And I think they're probably right. So it's a weird thing to be in, where it's like, I've told her, I'm like, I don't want to try to force this. The cool thing about this is this doesn't have to happen now. This could be something totally different. It could turn into something different. It could be in 5 years. It could be in 10 years. It could be never. So I don't want to like, well, can you send it to more people? I don't really want to do that because I don't feel like it has to happen right now. And so then what I started working on is something I've been toying with in my mind for a while and kind of playing around with, which is fiction.
Okay.
Which is like trying to figure out a way to combine my love for rock bands, as I've mentioned many times, bad action movies, and good thrillers in like a rock, like it's a band on tour and things explode and bad things happen and you don't know what's going to happen next. That kind of vibe. And so I've been working on that, and
I love it.
Regardless of where it goes, it is just so fun. And there's something really interesting about, writing my book I would never describe it as fun. I liked it and it was cathartic and I'm glad I did it. But there were very few moments where I was like laughing out loud.
Right.
Like, this feels so good. It was never that. It's not that kind of a book. This stuff feels like that. And then I think I just realized like, wow. And then this can happen because I just decided it and I can write that. And that's even funnier or scarier or different. And there's something I've never done that, but I really like it. So I don't know if it'll turn into anything, but I'm definitely writing. And I want to write another book. I need to figure out what it is. And
with this fiction book, are you finding a completely different voice coming out of you?
I'm kind of finding the opposite. I'm like, well, this is just me.
It's just you? Okay.
It's me with like, blue hair or whatever. Not literally, but like, it's me and whatever.
And a long overcoat.
Yeah. Even like some of the crazy tour stories are like, well, that's just like this real tour story with like 10 more levels of what could have happened or craziness or, that like, that's kind of what it feels like, but in a fun way. But but no, I don't think I haven't used it to totally step outside of myself. I think it's
so whether it becomes a book or not, it's still the process of doing the thing creatively.
Yeah, and it's really fun.
That's great.
But I do like, and I think you have this too, there's something very satisfying about making something and then putting it out. That's it feels weird to have written so much the sort of memoir stuff to have. I don't have another finished book, but I have. If someone said you need to finish this book in 6 months, I think I could.
Well, it's sort
of
like
much is sitting there, and that probably nothing's going to happen with that for now.
It's like you went in the studio,
right?
You recorded the record.
Exactly.
It's done.
Yep, some really great basic tracks.
You're not going to release it,
right? Still need some lyrics on a few songs, and
release it. Yeah, and maybe that's where it's at.
But there is this. I do agree with the sort of like what the universe is telling me, especially when it's just like all of that. When I wrote the books, My Life in the Sunshine, that's out, so much was still happening in real time. I was calling my editor, saying the ending happened when we were really close to done with the book. I'm not going to give it away, but I called her. I was like, something just happened and everything just changed, like, which I liked. That was actually really fun. And that's what this feels like too. my father died so recently, I was still writing about it, still writing about the funeral, writing it. So it's like, it might be nice to have some hindsight and have things slow down.
That could be the re-release of the record with bonus tracks.
Right, exactly. The deluxe edition.
The expanded deluxe edition.
Yes.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, this has been great. This feels to me like kind of a natural ending place.
Yeah, I'm really excited I'm excited for you and doing this. I think this is a great pursuit, and I think this is going to help your book.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Creative Asylum. A quick favor before you go. If you liked this conversation, please be sure to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop every Tuesday at 10. You can find us on Instagram and on YouTube at Creative Asylum CA. That's Creative Asylum and the letters CA. Our website is thecapod.com, and our Facebook is the same, facebook.com/thecapod. Until next week, when we'll have a new conversation with another creative disruptor, stay creative in life and at work.